I'm Rowan MacWilliam, and I'm Professor of Modern British History at Anglia Ruskin University in Cambridge. I'm also co-director of its Labour History Research Unit, and I have written the report, The Labour Renewal Project.
I'm Dr. Richard Carr, Senior Lecturer in History and Politics at Anglia Ruskin University, and author of the new book, March of the Moderates.
I'm Dr. Jonathan Davis, Reader in Modern European History at Anglia Ruskin University, Cambridge. I'm also co-director of the Labour History Research Unit and co-editor of Labour and the Left in the 1980s.
We believe that historians have a duty to contribute to political discussion.
Political renewal is a process a party goes through to find a way to reconnect with the electorate after a major shock. It would normally take place after a party has been out of power for some time, as this shows that what it has offered at various previous elections was not what voters wanted.
Renewal means more than just the winning of general elections. It also means developing a sense of mission amongst MPs and the Labour movement at large.
Just as the Conservatives had to reconcile themselves to a bigger state in the 1940s, or Labour to the consumer society in the 1950s, sometimes politicians have to revisit how their party should orient itself towards the electorate.
In the Labour Party's case, when it has renewed itself successfully in the past, it has offered a vision of the future that captured the public's imagination and made people think positively about Labour being an alternative to the incumbent government. It did this in 1945 when it established the National Health Service and the welfare state, in the 1960s with Wilson's white heat of technology, and in 1997 with Tony Blair.
Labour needs to identify the problems of modern Britain and come up with practical solutions that will make Britain a better place. Renewal does not mean embracing Tory policies. It does not mean embracing austerity. What it does mean is recognising that Labour needs to do progressive politics better. Labour lost the 2019 election because its Brexit policy was a fudge that pleased precisely nobody. But the cause of defeat went deeper.
Corbyn's shopping list of every left-wing agenda under the sun alienated too many voters, most of the British public indeed, who have little interest or faith in such causes.
Jeremy Corbyn never convinced the electorate that he could be a convincing Prime Minister. Then there was the problem that the party was tainted by allegations of anti-Semitism, which quite simply rotted Labour from within. Finally, Labour's manifesto was overloaded, as Keir Starmer has said. There were too many proposals and the costs of them were eye-popping. People quite simply did not believe the manifesto and turned to the Conservatives. Keir Starmer should recognise that Labour can only win if it unites both the political left and the political centre. He should be less interested in speaking to the Labour Party itself and more interested in speaking to the nation as a whole. He should impress people with Labour's focus on their priorities and with Labour's seriousness.
Starmer has wisely avoided tying himself to any concrete plans, stating that he was not going to pretend he could know what would be needed in 2024. By then, of course, he will need a plan not only to restructure the economy along different lines, but also plans to deal with Brexit, the environmental crisis, and funding the NHS and other public services.
A Labour government can't solve all Britain's problems in a 5-year term, and it shouldn't pretend to do so. Starmer instead needs to make people feel that Labour will be good at running things. Sure, his party should have grand aspirations, but it should also be practical and pragmatic. Labour under Starmer should speak to people's aspirations, their desire for a better life, their desire for themselves to get on and for their children to succeed. Starmer should match aspiration with solidarity. He should speak to people who understand they cannot get on unless they have a strong society around them. This is what we mean by a politics of interconnectedness. Interconnectedness means strong public services, high quality health and education, cheap transport to which all have access, well-designed urban infrastructure. For younger people, the priority will be their struggle with sky-high rents. For others, interconnectedness will be about access to a decent bus service. The priorities of the public are changing during the coronavirus pandemic, and Labour needs to speak to these priorities by demanding key workers are kept safe and are properly paid and honoured for their service. Labour under Starmer needs to be forward-looking, but forward-looking in the context of the 2020s means thinking about issues of climate change and of securing the planet for the next generation and for generations to come. We argue that Labour should engage with British society as it actually is, not as the left wants it to be. Labour in the 2020s needs to be brave enough to think small. It is always better to under-promise and over-deliver. No, it won't transform society as a whole, but it can create a better and fairer and more decent society, one that people want to live in. It has done that in the past, and it can do that again. Labour needs to be animated by the common good. It should focus on clean neighbourhoods free from crime. It should support higher wages and an increased minimum wage for the poor. It should focus on lifelong learning for all. It should embody modernity, supporting cutting-edge research and investing in the future. Labour should welcome the coming of new ideas and the use of new technology as we move towards the age of the driverless car. It should focus on a strong national health service and be prepared to tackle the problems of an ageing population. Not only dementia, but also loneliness. If one cares about radical solutions, one should care about their effective delivery. Labour has just suffered its worst electoral defeat since 1935. In order to form a government, it will need 124 MPs in addition to what it has now. That requires a larger swing than the one that Tony Blair got in his landslide victory in 1997. In order to renew itself, Labour needs a credible leader who commands the respect of the general public. However, things may be going Labour's way in the wake of the coronavirus pandemic. There's clearly a greater popular appetite for public spending and state intervention. Labour must make the running in showing how British society should be run after the pandemic, even though it will not get to implement the changes in the short term. It should make the British people face the future. In the Labour Renewal project, we've looked to Labour's history to show how it has revived itself in the past. We argue that Labour should not feel it has to make a choice between a Jeremy Corbyn approach or a Tony Blair approach. Both were unusual Labour figures who were not typical of the kind of leader that Labour has had in the past. Keir Starmer, for example, claims to admire Harold Wilson, who caught the modernising spirit of the 1960s. To renew itself, the character and personality of Labour activists needs to change. Many of its supporters are now middle-class graduates who sometimes live in a different mental world from the people Labour exists to represent. Many activists do not register that what they see as passion for the right causes can be regarded as finger-wagging virtue signalling by others. Activists should live their politics in a joyful but also in a humble way. Activism for the 2020s needs to recognise that one thing that puts people off the left, especially working class people, is the feeling that politically correct, well-off individuals are looking down their noses at them and seeking to police their behaviour. Activists should also not blame all of Labour's problems on the media. This is always the soft option for the left. Sure, much of the treatment of Labour by the press is unfair, but the media reflects as well as shapes public opinion. Reconnecting with voters then means paying them the respect that they can think for themselves. Labour has usually managed to win when it is prepared to look forward, when it stands for modernisation. That's the thread linking its victories in 1945, 1964, and 1997. It wins when it appeals across the classes, from middle-class professionals through to people working in call centres and supporting the elderly in care homes. It wins and renews itself when it is pragmatic, when it offers commonsensical solutions. As Tony Blair said, the big question to ask when devising policy is, what works? Labour has also renewed itself when it has been able to identify issues whose time has come. In 1997, that meant the minimum wage. In the 2020s, it will mean serious action against climate change and rebuilding society so that it can resist serious pandemics. Labour does not win and does not renew itself when it is divided. If you want to know more, come and read our report, The Labour Renewal Project, and join in the discussion.